Back here in the nightcap, Gerald Brown in for George Reister here on Mad Dog Sports Radio. Let's pick up the guest line. This gentleman has his eyes and ears to everything with the New York Knicks. You can check it out on KnicksFanTV. He's also the newest member of SiriusXM NBA family. CP, the franchise, has joined me. CP, it's always a pleasure to be talking to you. I wish it with better terms that we could be celebrating that the Knicks finally got that superstar that they longed for in such a great period of time.
Gerald, always a pleasure to talk to you about basketball and the Knicks as well. And likewise, man, I was hoping to go into this holiday weekend, hoping that we had an all-star that we can talk about and how we move this team forward, but it just wasn't the case for the Knicks.
It definitely was the case. Let's break this thing down from the Knicks' perspective because, CP, I've been hearing so many different things that the Knicks offered more draft picks, a better package, in my humble opinion, to the Utah Jazz, and obviously they just went a different direction. What happens now for the Knicks?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, according to reports by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, they said that the Knicks were offering R.J. Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, 2 unprotected first-round picks, a top 5 protected first-round pick in 2025, which had belonged to the Milwaukee Bucks, and then they would have had to have sent another first-round pick to a third team to unload Evan Fournier's contract. Utah apparently wanted Quentin Grimes as well in that deal, and so they ultimately pivoted towards a deal with Cleveland on Tuesday night and never gave the Knicks an opportunity to counter. Where the Knicks go from here is, they did acquire Jalen Brunson this past offseason, and they still have 10 players, Gerald, under 25. And, there are some players that are being blocked. You have Obi Toppin, who they drafted with the 8th pick. They're not sure where he stands because Julius Randle, they signed to a max contract, and he's blocking Obi Toppin. You have Evan Fournier there, but as I said, Quentin Grimes is a guy that the Knicks held in high regard. They also traded a first-round pick for Cam Reddish, and so they have a bevy of young talent on their roster. I believe where they need to go now is to play these kids, evaluate the talent that they have on their roster. Do they have a potential all-star in their midst? I think R.J. Barrett is on their way, but I think these kids need a more of an extended look to see what they have because right now they're stuck in the middle, and that's a bad place to be in the NBA.
Yeah, CP, and I think the biggest thing is look, Cleveland got better. I think Cleveland just took a step up. We know that obviously Boston is still there. Brooklyn looks like the waters have calmed down and settled for them. But it just seems apparent if there is anything that is positive that could come out of this, look, they still have their draft picks.
Right.
And you know what? Doggone it, this thing is going to pan out. They're going to draft someone that inevitably becomes that centerpiece that they can be able to build around. Who knows when that may happen? But at this point, TP, I think the course of action is, you know what, keep drafting because I got to say, Scott Perry has done a great, great job. And a lot of the times he doesn't get a lot of the credit. Obviously, Leon Rose came in and stuff like that, but it was Scott Perry that basically was there when they drafted R.J. Barrett. They make this deal for Julius Randle. Nobody saw him all of a sudden finish second team All-NBA. So they have been doing some things, but I think obviously when Leon Rose came there, it was really the thought that they could get a veteran or a superstar in there via free agency.
He was brought in here to bring in a star, no doubt. And I thought when he came in and when they hired Johnny Bryant as the associate coach, Johnny Bryant having been the assistant coach with Utah Jazz with Donovan Mitchell, they brought in Walt Perrin, who was the advanced scout with the Utah Jazz for a number of years, who pretty much built that team and has been known to find diamonds in the rough. I thought all signs led to them getting Donovan Mitchell, but nevertheless, they didn't. As you pointed out, they have been drafting well with Scott Perry, with Walt Perrin in tow. They've been able to find some quality picks and some value late in the draft. You talk about Emmanuel Quickley. You talk about Quentin Grimes. They got a draft and stash pick in Rokas Jokubaitis, who's playing over in Spain, currently playing in the Eurobasket. So that's one thing that they can lean on, and they're going to have to lean on that because the problem is two things, Gerald, is that right now with this current roster, they have a team that's capable of winning, say, 38 on the low side to say 45 on the high side in wins. And now that's going to probably get you between, say, the 10th, the 14th pick in the draft. You're really not in prime lottery space. And so they're going to have to rely on their scouts to pull out some diamonds in the rough and hope that they can pull out, the next Jimmy Butler or the next Paul George or somebody that, was picked in those teams that can maybe emerge as a star. The second problem is, where does Tom Thibodeau factor into this? When he came in, one of the things that he said was, hey, we can't wait around for stars. We have to go get these guys when we have the opportunity. He's a coach that wants to win, doesn't really buy into, the draft and development style. And so they have to get on the same page with Tom Thibodeau, see where does he stand and move forward as an organization, as one unit.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing moving forward. He is CP the Fanchise. KnicksFanTV. Also, you hear him on SiriusXM NBA Radio. Joining me, Gerald Brown, here in the nightcap of Mad Dog Sports Radio. So, one thing is two things, and I didn't think that I was going to say this, but this is another prime example that I got to say that, when this whole thing sort of turns the corner, we're going to have to probably look at a guy like James Dolan and say, you know what? He put his money behind his team and where his mouth is and put and invested into this team. And it's not his fault that these things haven't turned out well. The only thing I hold against him, and the only thing I will hold against him, is the issue with Charles Oakley and the way that was handled. But that's another story for another day. I'm talking about right now, you can never fault him because he's doing everything possible, CP, to put these guys in place to try to go out and get, and he's spending the money. But right now, CP, is kind of now, if you will, the pressure starting to go ahead and tip and turn towards a guy like Leon Rose.
Absolutely. I think the pressure will be on. One thing with James Dolan, it seems like from the past, whether you look at Isaiah Thomas, you look at Steve Mills, Leon Rose, when he has relationships with these guys, he typically gives them a lot of leeway to make their decisions on behalf of the franchise. And so I think he still has confidence in Leon Rose, but, this not making this Donovan Mitchell trade, I think that James Dolan has, made pivot. If this team doesn't come out the gates well, does not come out to a good start, and they've got to show improve. I think there's pressure on Leon Rose. There's pressure on Tom Thibodeau to continue to field a competitive team. And the frustrating thing, Gerald, is that the price for Donovan Mitchell was too steep. The Knicks were not in a position where they could afford to pair off some of their young talent as well as draft capital to bring this guy in here because they would not be able to bring in additional talent down the road. The Cleveland Cavaliers were set up to do just that. They have Darius Garland. They have Evan Mobley, two cornerstone homegrown talents. And the pieces that they parted with, they didn't really need those guys. They didn't need Colin Sexton or Lowry Marketing. They could afford to make that trade. So the frustrating thing is that the Knicks are never in this position to be ready to make a trade like this, even though they've been acquiring all that draft capital over the last 3 years.
Yeah, CP, I got to say this, and I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm a little perturbed by the fact is that James Dolan, Leon Rose, and everybody that was brought in, because here's the thing. We thought that we heard that, hey, listen, Karl Anthony Towns, he would be coming because he's a CAA client,
right,
which Leon Rose was associated with. We heard all these particular players, and none of them have never materialized. And what makes this thing worse is that Donovan Mitchell is a CAA client.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that right there is something that might get swept under the rug, but it really causes a level of concern because he's not been able to deliver. And I got to disagree. When you are the Knicks and you have been starving for a centerpiece that you can build around that's 25 years old, you got to push the chips into the center of the table and say, hey, we got a piece, and now we can add around it. And I thought that basically if they would have done something like that, you have a sense of direction and where you may be going and try to build in different areas. Because right now, if you're talking about building through the draft, if you're talking about trying to build a championship team, look at Golden State, look at Milwaukee. Yeah, you got to build through the draft, develop those players, but you also got to trade, you got to sign free agents. And I think that maybe, just maybe, a Donovan Mitchell that's in that centerpiece now alleviates a lot of concern and pressure from other future free agents that said, I don't want to go there because I got to I got to shoulder the load to be the guy.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gerald. I think the challenge is like, okay, let's say you bring in a Mitchell with his contract. You have a Jalen Brunson with his contract. The next move was going to have to likely be via trade, and that's why I think that the Knicks were so gun-shy in pulling off this trade for Donovan Mitchell. They had already offered 2 unprotected first-round picks. They offered a top 5 protected. Utah, it was said that Utah wanted a third fully unprotected, and then they would have had to, if they traded R.J. Barrett in this deal, they would have had to attach another first-round pick to send Evan Fournier's salary off of the team. I mean, that's just a lot to have to pair off. Yes, Donovan Mitchell would have been a marquee name. I mean, he made every attempt to show that he wanted to play for the Knicks. I mean, he was all over New York this past summer. The Met game, Rucker Park, the Rangers game. He was everywhere. So clearly he wanted to come home. I just thought it was a difficult trade for this team to make, and it would have hamstrung them to build in there for the future.
Yeah, he is CP, the franchise creator of KnicksFanTV, as well as newest member of the SiriusXM NBA family, joining me, Gerald Brown, here in the nightcap on Mad Dog Sports Radio. CP, I think it's a tough day. Moving forward, and I mean, if there's a silver lining, what player, in your estimation, on this current Knicks roster now has to feel some sense of pressure to be able to step up and basically show that they were worth being a part of this Knicks team moving forward? Because certain guys got paid, not this year, but also last year.
Absolutely. Well, it starts with R.J. Barrett. He just got a 4-year, $120 million extension. He's going to have to show and prove that he can take another step in his 4th year. Jalen Brunson as well. Jalen Brunson was signed to a 4-year, $104 million deal. The Knicks have been languishing at the point guard position for almost a decade. And so he has to come in and show that he can be a stabilizing force, help them distribute the ball, help them score as well, especially inside the arc where the Knicks have been woefully inefficient. And then thirdly, it's Julius Randle. Despite the fact that he averaged 20 points and 9 rebounds last year, mentally he just had so many moments that the fans were scratching their head. The thumbs down incident at home at the Garden. It seems like the pressure of really being the guy in New York really got to him, and he certainly faltered under the spotlight. So those 3 guys, that is the big 3 of the New York Knicks as it stands right now. And, if, especially Julius Randle, if he's still on the roster come training camp, it will be those 3 guys that'll have the most pressure to perform for this team.
I'm going to throw Evan Fournier in there. I think Evan Fournier was the guy that obviously was under one of Leon Rose's free agents and stuff, and they signed him to a big deal, and really he just never was able to get going and stuff. So I think that clearly you could be able to throw these guys in. Real quickly, CP, before I let you get on out of here, is there a space, or is there sort of a sense of now, maybe more than ever, Carmelo Anthony should be sort of welcome back home?
Gerald, when we came on earlier, I mentioned the fact that I think they should really be focusing on their youth. There is a logjam at the power forward position with Obi Toppin, who they drafted, but he's being blocked by Julius Randle. So when Julius Randle went out last year and Obi Toppin started, he flourished with this team. And so they have to give an extended look to these kids. I think Carmelo coming here would complicate that situation. I think Carmelo needs to go to a championship contender. Brooklyn Nets, Boston Celtics just lost Danilo Gallinari to a torn ACL. That could be his window. Maybe Golden State is looking for a veteran presence, but I think Carmelo coming here, you can't give Tom Thibodeau too many veteran options to lean on because it will come at the detriment of the younger players' playing time. And I think now's the time when the Knicks really need to peel it back and focus on their youth to see what they really have so that they can chart a way forward for their future.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Again, it's the same old song with the New York Knicks, but Mama always said there'd be days like this, nothing like this. We shall see. Listen, CP, where can people check out everything you're doing outside of SiriusXM NBA Radio?
Absolutely, man. It's youtube.com/KnicksFanTV, and it's also at CP the Fanchise on Instagram, Twitter, you name it. Gerald, always appreciate the time, and anytime you want to have me on, I'm always available.
My man, I appreciate you. He is CP the Fanchise. The insight and ins and outs associated with the New York Knicks, joining me, Gerald Brown, here in the Nightcap.